Okay.
Okay, can you hear me? No. What? No. So, I really hate being stuck behind a chair with a microphone. And I normally talk about this loud. I know my girlfriend hates when I talk this loud to her. But if you can hear me like this, I'd be a lot happier moving around here and dancing for you and stuff than I would if I had to sit back there. Is that okay? Good. Is there anyone here who has a problem with English? I can do this talk in German. No. Okay. Hi, my name is Joseph. That's down there in the corner there. Just a little about me. I'm originally from New York, but I've lived in Switzerland for the past 20-some years, and I just came up this morning and... Hey, come on. I don't know how this works. This is on the front of our plane when we fly out there, so I hope you all got through the Christmas holidays as well as I did. I was sort of worried. I ate so much at Christmas dinner, I wasn't sure I could get both hands on the keyboard at the same time. But I'm going to spend a little time now talking to you about a computer language which is so new, I'm not even sure it's going to work. I just got the last download from Dave Simmons this morning before I packed up my stuff to come here. Okay, and language is called SmallScript, and it is a scripting language that is based on Smalltalk. Is there anybody here who's ever had any experience with Smalltalk? That's great. I'll buy you a beer afterwards. Okay. Problem with most scripting languages is they tend to come out of a tradition starting back in the early 70s. You get, let's start back here with Shell, and awk, going all the way up through Perl, PHP, Python, Ruby, in this direction. Place this at around 72. At the same time, back in 72, there were these geeks out there at Xerox who invented a language called Smalltalk. And that more or less stayed the same up till about in the mid-90s. I dated between 95 and 98. There started to be some changes there in the syntax. And what's happening is that SmallScript is deriving into this really funky language which combines both sides. I can take Smalltalk code and port it over almost one-to-one to SmallScript. I can also take Java code and port it over almost one-to-one to SmallScript. There's a parser in there which eats almost everything. And the problem is, it was written so that in the beginning, because Dave Simmons, the guy who invented it, really cool guy, he wasn't quite sure what he wanted the language to be able to contain, so he started packing in a superparser that understood almost everything. And now we're at the point where we're sort of paring away things, having people test the language, find out what are the certain idioms that they use to develop in the language, depending on which direction they come from, and just taking away things from the language, which is why there may be some examples that I have here which might not work on this latest distribution. So if something happens, don't blame me. I'm just talking about it. One interesting thing about Smalltalk as a language is that it's a dynamically typed, so not a, we tend to call it a stiffly typed language. And this was always criticized by people who favored strongly typed languages. But it's just funny that once you get to scripting languages, be it Visual Basic, be it JavaScript, it's accepted that languages don't have to be strongly statically typed. And we said, okay, this might also be an advantage for people who want to use small script. So, where does this come from? Smalltalk's been around for a long time, and there are still currently more vendors and more commercial implementations of Smalltalk than there are of Java. And I believe there are still more commercial implementations of Smalltalk IDEs than there are for C++, which is interesting for a language that's supposedly dying. It's, as Frank Zappa said, it's not dead, it just smells bad. And how did small script come around? Back in about 1998, I guess it was, Microsoft, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to speak that name loudly here or not, started putting a team of people together to put something they called Com Plus or Com Spy. Their new form of COM on a new platform. They wanted to be able to support multiple languages on the same substrate, and one of the smart things they did is they got a guy named George Bosworth in. George wrote most of the virtual machine for Digitalk Smalltalk implementation in assembler. He was a real masochist. But they got him in because Anders Helberg was having problems doing garbage collection on dynamically typed languages, so they decided to get a Smalltalk specialist in to help out with that. And they put together this common substrate which will be able to support multiple languages. That has essentially evolved into what's known now as .NET. And SmallScript was just the Smalltalk implementation on .NET. Now, as we'll see later, it runs not only on the .NET virtual machine, but it runs on its own virtual machine on Windows and on a couple other architectures. So you can get it now. You can download the beta. You can play with it. If anybody wants to have fun, we can sit together down in the restaurant and have a beer afterwards and hack some code and see if we can break it or not. So, what are some cool things about it? All the advantages that you have in Smalltalk, lightweight, very modular, very fast, amazingly fast. It has a full meta-object protocol, similar to Smalltalk or Lisp MOPS. You have optional typing on methods, which makes it, this is something which isn't amazing for people who do C++ or Java, but for Smalltalk that you can start typing methods depending on the type of the parameters which are passed over to them, can be an advantage in optimizing the execution time of the method. Smalltalk is a class-based language. You can set up instance-specific behavior in the language. There's still some work being done on that. Has a distinction between modules and namespaces.
and maps them quite well to the .NET ideas of assemblies and modules. Supports interfaces, and finally has selector namespaces. Thank God somebody finally implemented selector namespaces. What does selector namespace mean? In a language like Java, when you get it out of the box, you have a class string, and all the methods for string are there. You can't add any, you can't change any. Tough luck. Well, you make a subclass of string in order to do some things with it. In Smalltalk, you can add methods and you can overwrite methods on any class in the system. Now, the problem has come to be that there are some methods which have been historically missing in the base system, which I write, or somebody else writes, and everybody writes. So I write my implementation of a method in class object, and writes one method called foo. Now, what selector namespaces let you do is say, I want to have both implementations of foo in the system, and I want to be able to call specifically through a scoping mechanism, depending on which namespace I'm in, use one or the other form of the method which is selector named foo. Now this is convenient because before we did that, we used to do things called namespace prefixing, which means that all my methods, which I would use if I was scared that somebody would write a method with the same name, I'd start putting a couple little letters on the beginning saying, JP foo, or the name of the company or the project foo. This saves this hassle now. You can say specifically which method implementation you want to use. You can also make methods private to the class. You can make methods non-inheritable. Say that this method in object, I can have two implementations of foo in object. One can be only called if the caller is an object and won't be used by any other subclasses of object. And there's another version of foo, which is then the inherited form of foo. I'll show you some examples for that afterwards. If I don't use the microphone,
we don't have any records.
Jeez, can I sort of hold it out here? I hate microphones. No problem. Okay. Is this coming through the speakers now too? God. Okay, so what's happened is that SmallScript has become a superset of Smalltalk, which contains not only Smalltalk, but contains a lot of syntactic sugar to make it compatible to other languages. The idea was to get people from a number of different languages up and running as quickly as possible, writing their language. And yeah, there's a bunch of stuff up here on this slide, but that's not that interesting. So let's take a look at SmallScript and where it is. Sorry. Hey, get back. I think that it's my Java VM on here, which is probably doing this to me. Take a look at this. Is a little bit dark, I guess, but SmallScript and how it's running currently. What's out there for you to download and try is this section here. You have a compiler and you have a VM which runs on current Windows architectures. What is being worked on right now at Microsoft is finally getting this up. Now, we know how good Microsoft is in keeping shipping dates, so we're going to be patient with that. This is up and running. Once you get this, we get the language and the compiler set up, it will be able to generate onto the .NET platform just using a substrate library which provides some additional support routines. Now, the idea on .NET is that every language you get a C# file, and you can compile that and run that on their library. the Eiffel implementation is coming along pretty good. The Dylan and Lisp implementations are also running along. There's a bunch of languages running now, which will probably be done before Microsoft finally ships .NET. But this is essentially the main idea. They're all running on one VM. So let's see if I can do this and only turn one page at a time now. Okay, stay there. Please stay there. I hate this. Really, I didn't plan on doing this. But we can stay at this slide now. Okay, where's it running? The AOS platform, the intrinsic small script platform, is running on x86 on all Windows derivatives. They actually were able to put in a fix which even made it run on Windows 95 if there's somebody out there who has a mutant computer that's still running that. I have it running at home on Windows 98. I have on one machine, and NT4 and 2000. Linux on x86 should be out in a couple months, which makes it really nice. Bring up a shell, and the shell understands Smalltalk. Understands this really complex language that you can program multiple languages in. There's work being done on OX 10 and possibly Linux on the Mac. And there's a bunch of other questions out here. What's going to be done on the .NET platform depends on where Microsoft decides to support .NET. We know that it'll be on Windows on x86. It'll be on Wince. And there's no word from Microsoft yet about the other platforms. I've heard something that one of the first things they'll target here will be the DEC Alpha. They've always been good at trying to get digital stuff up and running. So that's the way it looks for that. Okay, there's all these examples, all these three columns are small script. You can program in whichever one of these forms you like. If you like it in Smalltalk, you can program it using square brackets. You can program it using curly brackets, and you can program it using angle brackets in XML syntax. Which means you can get really strange mixed syntax things which will look like one foo ... barf to 42. I'm sending a Smalltalk keyword message, and the argument is being called in C style. It understands all this stuff, which makes it really difficult to see. If you read in the small script news group, depending on the history of the person doing the work, you'll get totally different styles. And this is a problem with the language right now, is that it's sort of going here and there. We're sort of trying to... It's at the point of calming down now. The initial beta was brought out at Uppsala back in October, and there's been a bunch of people out trying different things on it, and there's sort of become a consensus in the small script community about how the language should look. But yeah, if you want to program your C++, Java style syntax and code, you can pretty much take it over and get it up and running quite quickly. Which languages are supported? Now, there's two different things happening here. There's a movement to be able to support other stuff running understandable in small script. There's another movement to use this small script virtual machine to support other languages. The people doing the most work on this right now are from Ruby. They think it might be a real cool thing to get Ruby up and running on the small script virtual machine. Work's being done. The Visual Basic engine on .NET will be running via small script. That's interesting. There's VB support. ECMA JavaScript support is almost up there. This is a bunch of other languages which are either supported or will be planned included. Interesting thing about this is, okay, you have support for Smalltalk, but if you can write things in C or C++, essentially you have inlined or embedded support for multiple languages. I can write something in Smalltalk. If I want to go down and express it in a different way, I just turn and embed C code in there. I can also embed 86 assembler in there, although I haven't done any work in 86 assembler for a couple of years, thank God. But you can do it. You can just as easily inline assembler stuff. And it's a quirky kind of language that you can write whatever you want in it, and somehow it seems to understand it. What does a small script object look like? Now, being as the language comes from Smalltalk, there is this basic idea that everything is an object. There are different types of objects, and the guys who've developed SmallScript have decided that they will make one unified form of an object and just use some bits in the header to define what fields are going to be in there and not. In Smalltalk, you have objects that have named and or indexed instance variables. Your regular object will have a number of instance variables which you call by name. You have a person and a forename, family name, address. These are all instance variables. Essentially what those are references to slots which have pointers to other types of objects. You can have indexed instance variables which you access via an index, and this index is just an offset in the object which gives you a pointer to yet another object. Now this tends to get very heavy for objects like strings. It would be stupid to say, okay, a string's nice to have index, but I don't want to have a 4-byte offset to just a character. That would be costing me 4 bytes for every byte that I have in the character. So for strings, byte arrays, word arrays, things like that, you have an optimized type of storage. In Smalltalk, you have to differentiate between classes, variable subclasses, variable byte subclasses, etc. What you have here is you have all this combined. An object can have all of these things at the same time. They're still at work trying to figure out how to define the syntax so you can define all these objects. You can also define objects that automatically generate accesses for their instance variables, or that will force all accesses to the instance variables to be via accessors. Inside of the instance, you can say that let all accesses to inst vars be over an accessor, even though you write a direct access. Yeah. Okay. Good. All the other stuff, weak references, finalization, all that cool garbage collection stuff is also in there. Yeah, this is a slide which shows the internal structure. I can get back to that later if somebody's really interested in that. So, what does it look like? This is really funky. I sort of think this is interesting because the first thing you see is the square brackets for Smalltalk. This is just a block which is evaluated. Standard out. It's a scripting language. It doesn't have an IDE like Smalltalk does. Doesn't have a transcript. So we write to standard out. And we send it a character return, and we send it essentially a next put all, and send it hello world. And let's take a look at what this thing looks at work. Is there a way I can sort of turn on to this microphone now? since I'm sitting down, or do I have to type one-handed? This works too. Good. So let's try to. Hello?
Yeah.
Great. I'm gonna put this here. Okay. So demo 1, hello world script. So this is hello world up here. I have this set up. I'm working in TextPad right now, and just set up so that I can run it, and it'll give me a hello world down here. Now, just so you believe me, hello CCC, and let's compile and run this, and we'll see the result down here. Let me take this out and run the script in a DOS shell. What this is doing is building an image on the fly. Smalltalk is an image-based language. It's building an object net and evaluating this in the context of the object net on the fly. I don't have my tools on this machine to evaluate, but I think the time is between 9 and 11 milliseconds to build an image, depending on what you have packed in it. Okay, let's see. This is the standard Smalltalk thing. I can also go in here and say standard out, carriage return, next put all. Hello. Oops. So, standard out, carriage return, next put all, hello CCC, and run it again. And it runs. Okay. Let's go close this one up. Let's take a look at this in the XML syntax. That just calls a function now in standard C way. We'll call main, and main just does standard out, do a carriage return, and do next put all of hello world. And then we'll evaluate main, which does the same thing. You can take that out here and run this in this DOS shell, and it runs. So, it's nice to be able to run scripts, but it's even cooler than to be able to compile to an executable. In order to do that, you send a command to the compiler saying you want to target an executable, name the module so you can call it from outside. You define your entry point function, main, standard out. This is starting to look a little bit more like something C-based and a lot less like something Smalltalk-based. So what this is going to do is this script will not execute. This script will compile, and then we can run the executable afterwards. So let's run the compiler on this, and it's finished. And now we can run this, and it'll give me my hello world. Compiling time on that is somewhere in the area of 20 to 50 milliseconds. Yeah, let's go back here and take some more looks. Okay. Thread safe collections. Let's jump over collections. Typing and callbacks. Let's do a module demo. What I have here is an application which contains an executable and a DLL. And I'm just wondering how much time how we're doing. Let's take a look through at some of this code that's happening here. This we just saw before. We're going to compile an executable here. And this says it requires a module named module2. That happens to be over here. That's a DLL. This module is called multipart app, and it imports module2, and it imports X. So what main is going to do is show the dictionary and the scope of the current method and run another thing and run OK and gotcha, which are down here. Now, and another thing just happens to be defined over here. As a function, which will be called out from the DLL. So, in order to build this, we have to first build the DLL. There's a bunch of commands here saying let's target the DLL and let's do this without the logo. The assembly befehl is a definition for the .NET platform, which defines it in context of a .NET assembly. So what we do here is we hit this and run this and compile the DLL. We come back and see we have the DLL. Let's compile the application, and that'll run and it'll bind the DLL, and we run the program, and it gives us a bunch of stuff which you only understand if we really go in detail into the code, but I'll be happy to do that with you afterwards. What's impressive is how little it takes and how quick it is to be able to compile something into a DLL, compile something into an executable, and to get it to run. And this is one thing that's been getting people who work in other languages to look at either adding support for their language into SmallScript, or being able to take their language and run that on top of just this other virtual machine. Just a little bit of history to that. The virtual machine thing, Dave Simmons, the guy who invented this language, worked for a number of years at the NCSA, the National Center for Supercomputing Applications, working on optimizing compilers, and likes things very small and very fast. After that, he worked for 5 years at Apple, where all of his best work was kept internal by the Advanced Technologies Group, which was something which really burned him out. He did some really great work there, and Apple never let it out of the house because it was all an investment in the ATG. Finally got out of there, founded his own company, Quasar Knowledge Systems, or QKS. Quasar had a history of almost bringing software onto the market, almost being there for a number of years. And back in '98, they were contacted by Microsoft and have been doing work now for Microsoft since then. And SmallScript was just announced last year, and the first beta seed just came out in October. Sort of roughly the history of how this language and the guy who developed it evolved. So it's been targeted at being very small and very quick. Oh, wow, I lost everything here, didn't I? Ouch. Sorry. Callbacks. Let's hit the next slide. Event notification. Event notification. What about it? You can tell any object. This is interesting. I define a new instance of X. This is yet another typical Smalltalk thing. You can define variables when you need them. The pipe are used in Smalltalk syntax to say this is a variable name, or this is a temp name. And this is a Smalltalk reference. And we could also say X new. But here we use the C syntax for that. And we just say when foo, we can send a notifier or something using a Smalltalk block, or when foo is sent, then we can do something and delegate. And then we send X foo. So what we see here in these brackets down the bottom is the evaluation section. if you want to have a Smalltalk script run when you hit the compiler, you just define an evaluate block down at the bottom. Otherwise, it presumes you're probably just going to be defining this class, and it expects you to say, are you going to define this, compile this into a DLL, are you going to compile this into an executable or not? So let's go out and run this outside. No. So what happens when I run this? It'll tell me the method has been, foo has been sent twice. It's been sent once, and it had a notifier and a delegator on it using a simple syntax. Selector namespaces. It's like I'd like to show you selector namespaces, but it's going to take me an hour to describe what the code does. We can take a look into it, but please don't start hitting me with a lot of questions about it. Binding predicate test. Okay, let's see if I can get through this. I have a class named A and a method called foo. I actually have 4 different versions of the method called foo. I have one private, which can only be used if it's called by an instance of class A. I have one scoped in my namespace, which means that will be called by any other classes defined within my namespace. I have a non-inheritable version of that, which could also only be called using it by an instance of A, and I have the standard version of it. There's a bunch of interesting things here which pop up about around. There's support for method wrappers. You can define a wrapper on a method, which means define a method which will be evaluated before the actual method. You can define it before or after. There's a bit of a problem with the syntax right now, defining exactly how we are going to call methods which are done before, done after, done instead of other methods. So what happens here is this will be run on foo, and depending on who calls it, we'll get a different answer out from here. Then we have an extension to that, and that'll be running in. This is an around method which says we'll run this one first and then call next method means call the real implementation of it afterwards. So you can just shove in another method as a wrapper which will let you track calls to this method, which is useful for profiling, for other types of tracing, or debugging. Believe me, it works. You can download it. You can try it yourself. Multi-methods is essentially the same thing. Okay, I'm at the point now where the examples will start getting so technically difficult that it'll take longer to explain them than the amount of time I have. So I think this is about a good time to break and take questions if anybody has questions, or if you've all fallen asleep. Thank you for not snoring that loudly. I can't promise I can answer all questions, but I'll try to do as well as I can, and I'll get you the contact information. If you want to get this stuff, www.smallscript.org. You can register, you can download the beta. The beta is being updated on a bi-weekly basis, so every 2 weeks. There's a very active news group up here. Unfortunately, the language is moving so fast that I just got an HTTP server yesterday, and I was going to set up all my slides to be generated automatically and fed through the SmallScript HTTP server. But then I went and had to eat dinner. But maybe next year. Are there any questions? Yeah.
I'm afraid that when you support so many different styles of syntaxes, that programs quickly can get very messy. Like
This is
control programs.
The question was, are we afraid that if you support so many different types of syntax, that the programs can get really messy and not easily understandable? Yes. This is why Dave said in the beginning, let's bring this out and support all this stuff and let's find a common ground for the people who are testing it and using it. And at the point now of just paring away certain things and saying, this is the way we'd really like things to be done. But yeah, that is a major concern because I see the way some other people write small script and I can't understand it.
That's the problem. You have to really understand it.
Yeah.
There's so many different ideas.
Yeah, because it's interesting. There are people in the small script community, a lot coming from Smalltalk, some coming from Java and C, C++, and some people coming from Lisp, who are writing totally different styles of code. And what is going to be the style? And we're at the point now of essentially defining the style. It's like every language, be it a spoken language or a computer language, has vocabulary, it has grammar rules, it has idioms, and it also has sort of, ways to be polite. Things you just don't say. Like you don't get up in front of people and start boring you in your nose or something like that. These things are just polite, and there's ways to do this in a language, and we're just trying to figure out the idioms and the the proper ways of doing things in this language, and it's not finished yet. And if you want to contribute, we're open to listening to anybody who has input. Yeah.
Does there exist a class library like Smalltalk with those collections and numbers?
Does a class library exist like Smalltalk? Yes, it does. Most of the base class library is currently packed into the DLL, which is booted when the image runs. We're currently trying to figure out how to expose that so that people can see it or not. There are a bunch of scripts which will go through the whole class library and just print out everything, all the selectors, so you can get the information out of there. It's just, Dave only had so much time and was doing everything by himself in the beginning and couldn't do the language and the compiler and both runtime environments and do a development environment. The development environment, there is a basic one written in SmallScript itself, which Ian Upright has done, and that's being evolved. Like every 2 days he'll post a new version of it to the newsgroup, and that's at the point now where you can start looking through the whole image and finding out what's in there and how to use it. But that's definitely needed. There's a bunch of stuff I know about because I have the source code, but it's really sort of difficult when people only get it on a need-to-know basis, and they're working on that now. Anybody else? Yeah.
Slides I saw the acronym AOS, Agent Object System.
Yeah.
With mobile agents.
The acronym Agents Object System is something that Dave Simmons patented about 10 years ago for the Smalltalk agents dialect of Smalltalk. It doesn't have anything. Actually, it probably does, and you'd have to ask him about that, because his early work was also in that direction. So it probably does have something, but that's a bit of folklore, which he can probably tell. Yeah.
Just a license question. It's commercial and there are versions which are free of charge? Or
Yeah. SmallScript on the Windows platform and then on the AOS platform, which means for Windows, then for Linux and Mac. This is inside information. I know that the Linux on 86 architecture and Mac OS 10 will be free. The stuff running on .NET will be supplied as part of the .NET Developer Studio as a plugin. So the stuff you run now, that's all going to be free of charge. Yeah?
Is it possible to sandbox the runtime environment like Java?
Sandbox, yeah, that was actually the last example I wanted to do. You can sandbox with this quite well. But a lot of these, not all, but a lot of these examples are included in the SmallScript distribution. So when you get them, you get all this code to try out. And between that and stuff which is up on the news group, and at my company, on my website, I've started to put up an archive of a bunch of tools for SmallScript. just the latest versions of the stuff that other people are running. You can get a bunch of other examples. The first thing that I did that got me to learn it was I wrote a version of SUnit. If anybody's interested in hearing about SUnit and that stuff, this is a blatant publicity plug. I'm doing a talk on extreme programming tomorrow, and I'm a firm believer in test-driven development. And so the first thing I did was get an XUnit variant for this up and running. Yeah?
What was the intended primary utility for a small script? Do you intend to use the substitute for a scripting language like Perl, or?
Okay, what's the primary intended use or the primary goal? That's something that Dave would have to answer. I don't think it has anything to do with world domination. I don't think he goes that far yet. But it's an alternative scripting language for people who come from primarily then from the small talk culture, which I think offers enough interesting things in the way of performance and adaptability that it might be an interesting thing for people who work in other scripting environments to take a look at. I'm not the one to say whether it's better or worse than any other scripting language. There's a comparison table up on the SmallScript website that'll go through and do that. But I'm a firm believer in letting everybody use the language they're most comfortable with. And I just think it's cool that I can write stuff in this language and combine it immediately with stuff that people have written in other language. Now, if Dave Simmons was here and gave his full 3-hour talk, he'd go in and bring up the .NET environment and write a class in C#, subclass that in SmallScript, and subclass that in Visual Basic, and then run that from Eiffel. Been there, done that. It works, all of it. It's just I don't have the .NET stuff here, and I would really like to keep away from going that deep into the ugly, gory detail. Okay, well then, let me get, to find out what slide I'm on here. Select the namespaces, 19. Then the official last thing, thanking a bunch of people who are very active. These are some of the main names you'll start seeing in the Smalltalk community. At the end, the Knights of the Square Bracket are a bunch of Smalltalk geeks who are around not to save the world, but try to save the language. And I'd like to thank all of you. If anybody has any other questions or comments or things, thank you for not throwing rotten eggs and tomatoes at me. We can sit down and have a talk and take a look at stuff afterwards. Otherwise, I'll be around sometime today and tomorrow. Thanks a lot for coming, and thanks a lot for listening. Appreciate it.
I may have some questions, more about
Sure. Will you be around tomorrow?